Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's edition of the Beyond the Vault. With me, of course, is the one and only Andy Sheckman. You can find his work at milesfranklin.com. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you?
JC,
And
my
Happy New Year.
brother. Happy New Year, dude! And I can't wait to see you in March in for your show in Ottawa. But happy, healthy New Year to you and everyone else out there. Thanks for having me back.
Well, thank you. Appreciate to have you on. And holy shit, you and I took a break December 20th, and a lot has already transpired. And we
Yeah.
have to look at the political situation here before we look at the money front. First of all, I guess the big kicker in all of this, just the day before Christmas, Eric Trump put out a tweet of Donald Trump suggesting that he was wanting to buy Panama Canal, rename the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. He now wants to acquire Canada and Greenland. What do you make of all of this? I mean, we've heard these strategies before at the end of World War II in terms of redistributing the power map after the fight against the Nazi systems, but it's coming back up now. Some people thought it was a joke for the last couple of months. He's been trolling Trudeau, but it appears very much now that he's serious about all this. From an American perspective, what are you hearing? Why is this on the map right now for Donald Trump and this incoming administration, Andy?
Well, I mean, as far as the Gulf of Mexico being renamed the Gulf of America, I mean, the current administration went out of their way to rename everything and to wokeify everything and to change so much of our culture and to do it in what most perceive as a negative light. I
Right.
think it's kind of almost humorous, but yet emblematic of what he's trying to say is that we need to get our culture back, our country back, and let's take our body of water back in terms of its naming rights. Now, in terms of Canada, in terms of Greenland, there hasn't been a lot of real substantive information on it. But I mean, from a standpoint of national security and of natural resources, I get it. I mean, Greenland is supposed to be filled with rare earths and with precious metals. It's also would be a barrier, to the east. Of course, Canada, barrier to the north. I mean, I don't really think it's the mainstream media here has taken it very seriously. But maybe he is serious about it. I mean, he sent his son to Greenland, and of course, was having all sorts of conversations with Trudeau.
Yeah.
Would it be the worst thing in the world? Not for the United States. I can't speak for Canada or for Greenland, but I can understand the strategic argument for it. If it were all possible, I get it.
This is the conversation I want to have with you in terms of the de-dollarization, what's happening with the Brics nation, whether or not Trump is looking at a unified economic front, maybe in North America, to kind of fight the forces of the Brics, who appear to be on the verge of escape velocity in terms of the US dollar and in terms of international trade as well. So here, Trump was saying that he wanted to put massive tariffs on Denmark if they don't immediately relinquish control of Greenland. This doesn't appear to be jokes anymore. These are not just memes and tweets. He's actually saying these things. He was at Mar-a-Lago here. This is a news article from Fox News, and also now saying that he wants to use quote unquote economic force to acquire Canada. Now, when he summoned Justin Trudeau to Mar-a-Lago just a while back before Christmas, he was suggesting that he was going to impose a 25% tariff here on Canada if, at that time, Canada wasn't going to fix their terrorist problem here at the border. Trump was very upset that terrorists were coming through our Canadian border into the United States, and he wanted Canada to fix that problem. Now, here in the mainstream news, they kind of buried the lead on the terrorism part, and they said, "Oh, big bad Trump is, suggesting tariffs, and it's a bad thing for Canada," which it is. It could be very detrimental from our economic standpoint, but they weren't really talking about why he was doing it. So here again, he was proposing a change here for national security. In this case, the national security of the United States. Now, what he's saying in terms of acquiring Canada here in this particular video clip, he has another one here. He's talking about creating a North American Union to where he says, in effect, the United States is really already in charge of the defense of Canada. And it would make a lot more sense here moving forward if we had all of that into an umbrella. So going back to that question about the BRICS nations, How do you see the development? We've been talking about this for years now. We've had quite a few of those very strategic summit meetings in October. Where are we in the BRICS overtaking the dollar? Trump also now threatened them with 100% tariffs on those countries that are moving away from the US dollar. That seems to have fallen short so far. There was a little bit of rhetoric and maybe backtracking from India, but for the most part, it didn't really hit the mark. So, where do you stand right now on the BRICS and how that could be perhaps an existential threat here to the North American continent, Andy?
Well, a large part of the reason it didn't hit the mark was because the BIS pulling out of Project Enbridge at the 12th hour, saying they couldn't be party to a program like a cross-border payment program that would sidestep SWIFT with the country that was being sanctioned, namely Russia. It's as if for the last 4 years, their innovation hub, who has been working with China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE in development and actually rolling it out in operation, they just realized that Russia was the R in BRICS and pulled out at the 12th hour, which will only, I believe, crystallize their resolve. We just did see Indonesia become a full partner. They're the world's only nickel superpower. Along with the BRICS, other countries, producers, Russia's third, China's seventh, Brazil eighth, and Cuba, who is now one of the 9 additions in terms of partner countries: Belarus, Bolivia, Indonesia, who became a full member, Kazakhstan, which is the largest producer of, what is Kazakhstan the largest producer of? Kazakhstan is the largest, I just was reading this today, Kazakhstan is the largest producer of uranium in the world. Cuba, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan, they're joining as partner countries. Kazakhstan is already a member of the Eurasian Economic Union. They mentioned Belarus as one of these partner countries. It was the president of Belarus who came out and officially said we need to have a summit between the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to meld them into the BRICS. You can see these sides are being chosen. But you now have 9 of the 20 most populous countries on Earth as part of BRICS, with a combined population of over 4 billion. They hold almost 30% of the world's gold reserves, cover 30% of the world's land mass, represent almost half of the global population, if not more, account for 55% of global GDP. We're getting to a point where BRICS will control major trade routes and choke points around the world. All of this stuff is happening. Indonesia is a massive, they are the largest nickel producer, but rare earths in general. And their president, I think his name is like Wadudu, something along those lines. He came out a year or two ago and said, we need to build a BRICS style cartel for rare earths, just like we have with OPEC. And you can see that these countries are the ones that control the majority of it. They're doubling down on their acquisition of gold. They're building a BRICS gold exchange. And I always talk about the grain exchange, where the countries that are draining the world, like almost 50 million ounces of silver were delivered off of COMEX in December. Well, where did it go? A lot of it goes to Hong Kong, and a lot of it through exchange for physical. But it ultimately is going to these countries, and they're building this exchange. But it's reminiscent of the grain exchange, where 6 to 8 months ago, the guy that's developing and said, we produce and accumulate and consume more grain than the West does, but the West controls the price on COMEX. And when the BRICS grain exchange comes to fruition, that will change. Well, they understand that's the exact same thing that we're seeing on the COMEX and the LBMA, and these countries are doubling down their acquisition. It's interesting, too, because both China and Saudi Arabia said they weren't buying gold and were both caught by the import-export numbers coming out of the UK and Switzerland that said, no, you're buying way more. In fact, people believe by these numbers, China's been buying up to 10 times more than they are telling us. When they said they weren't, they actually were buying it through the People's Liberation Army, which isn't reported to the IMF, only through the PBOC, buying it through proxy banks, and at the same time going around the world and buying concentrate and doré, as we've talked about, which now represents 75% of all the industrial silver they're using is concentrate that they're buying directly from the miners, disintermediating the market. So what we are seeing we see China, we see Saudi Arabia hiding their real acquisitions. We've seen the information that's coming out of the BRICS much less transparent. Because in reality, one of the things that came out of the BRICS meeting, which really shocked me, was their admission that they wanted to integrate, although they wanted the whole system to change, favoring this Western-centric unipolar model to a multipolar world that benefits everyone. But with that being said, they wanted to integrate to the IMF, to the BIS, to the World Health Organization, to the United Nations. These are all the elitist Illuminati bad guys, if you will, the West, and the BIS. In essence, in my opinion, they did espionage on the BRICS at the 12th hour regarding Enbridge. And I think it really pissed them off, and it crystallized their resolve. And I think they will be less forthright as to their ultimate agenda. But you can see it is not something to take lightly with 9 more partner countries and with now the addition of the largest nickel producer in the world and one of the largest holders of rare earths in the world and one of the most populous, the 4th most populous nation in the world. These countries are becoming legit. The BRICS are coming legit, and they're just playing the long game. And that's the hard part for the people in the West to deal with, because we all expect instant gratification in everything. And when it doesn't roll out the way that we think, the way that we talk about, if there's something a variable that changes things slightly, people just dismiss it and move on. That's a big mistake. The BRICS are growing. They are becoming more legitimate. They are covering the majority of all of the land and sea routes, majority of the world's commodities, and the majority of human population. Not to mention, they're all selling U.S. treasuries and buying gold and buying other commodities, which is something that is going to be a very big problem for the West. And all of this, although not as in your face as it was the last couple of years, behind the scenes is still accelerating.
So the mainstream news is not really connecting the dots to everything you just mentioned. So it's very important to have alternative media look at these things. And if that is indeed the case, and it appears that it is, they're accelerating their momentum outside of the US dollar matrix. We're seeing more and more countries now also just very conveniently in the last couple of months find these new gold hoards. You and I were looking at China the last couple of times, and I think El Salvador, was it?
Yep.
Yeah, they just found this 3 trillion USD cash also. So they seem to be pre-positioning. So on one hand, we're seeing these drawdowns on the COMEX, the LBMA, these exchanges where physical gold and silver are held in contrast with paper. People are standing for delivery in the last years, presumably front running a trade that is about to happen. These countries here are pre-positioning themselves also. So on one hand, Andy, we have Trump saying that, okay, he's going to impose these tariffs on these intruding countries here on the status quo of the US dollar reserve. But on the second hand, he's also talking about creating this Bitcoin strategic reserve and maybe having some type of gold backing to it. Now, in the last number of months, we've seen some of the states, not in lockstep with the federal government, choose to legalize gold and silver as legal tender. We're seeing more and more of those legislations pass and become law. And we're seeing now also Texas proposing some type of gold-backed redeemable currency to compete also with the US dollar. So there's a lot going down. So he's fighting the fight on the exterior front, but he's also fighting it within. Now, within some of those statements, whether it's a Bitcoin strategic reserve or some of this gold backing somehow, and presumably this could be why he's also trying to acquire gold and what's Canada and the gold that's still in our ground here. Where do you think Trump is going with this? And speak about his nominees here moving forward and what they might be saying about some type of gold back standard making its way back here to the United States. Andy.
So I just interviewed this lady the other day, Judy Shelton. She was an advisor to the Trump's first administration. A high probability she will end up on the Federal Reserve Board in this administration. She was Trump's pick first time to run the Federal Reserve, and with all of the infighting and the partisan nonsense, she was not confirmed. One of the smartest human beings I've ever spoken to in my life. What she is advocating for is to issue treasuries backed by gold, 50-year treasuries redeemable in gold. The first thing she said we would have to do would be to first audit the Fed. I said, well, why the hell hasn't the Fed been, or the,
Right.
I said the Fed, and she said, no, that's an interesting point because I want to audit the Fed too. But what I meant to say was, why wasn't gold audited? I did the same thing with her. Why haven't we audited the gold that we're holding since 1953? And she said, good point. The excuses that they give are fugazi. They're, oh, it costs too much in the logistics. She more or less said, bullshit. You pay $1 million where the United States spend a few million bucks, audit the damn gold, inspire some confidence, and then collar it to a 50-year treasury, which would inspire confidence. Because
Right.
look, you just saw the 20-year treasury, and one of the ones we don't talk about as much hit 5%. We're right at the very dangerous level right now where rates are going to keep rising in order to get people to take our junk paper, which they understand inflation is not going away. The Fed has started lowering rates when they're almost 70% away from their target. That's like, getting in a cross-country car ride from California to New York and stopping in Omaha and saying, we've gone far enough, we're there, we win, plant the flag. They're 70% away from their goal, and they're lowering rates, which will only reignite this inflation. So yeah, I think that the lack of demand for treasuries and replacing it with gold is something huge, and which is part of the reason that I think we should talk about Bitcoin and the strategic reserve, and also part of the reason we should talk about gold. Now I'm going to talk about gold first and then come back to the Bitcoin reserve.
Sure.
One of the things that I saw over the last couple of weeks, I find to be very, very, let me say this. So much of my career, I've been the one stupid enough to say publicly that this is a conspiracy. This is wrong. And I've learned that there's a fine line between conspiracy and reality. I got up on stage 10 years ago, showed all sorts of charts about the AM and the PM fix getting slammed down every single day for a year over. In fact, I had a 10-year chart by a man named Dimitri Speck who condensed all the information into one chart, and it would show the AM fix and the PM fix in London get slammed every single time. And Sunday night coming into New York gets slammed every time for 10 years. All of that data, one chart said, and it was like, that's not how markets work, right?
No.
And I got up on stage and I said that, and Doug Casey got up after me and said, young man, that doesn't work. The traders at JP Morgan could never keep their mouth shut long enough. And JP Morgan paid almost $1 billion fine to the Justice Department for indeed just doing that. And Doug more or less apologized to me, not in so many words, but I would just simply say that there is a very fine line between conspiracy and reality. People would ask me all the time, do you think gold will be confiscated? And I would say, no, I don't, because when communist countries like China are openly pushing it to their citizens, it would be the death knell for this country, the supposed center of free trade and the country with virtues of liberty and justice. I said they take the ETFs instead. And well, who's the custodian of the world's largest silver trust? Well, that's JP Morgan, the company that paid a $920 million fine for manipulating the market. And the fourth or fifth largest gold trust or gold stockpile in the world, which is GLD, was always run by HSBC Bank, was always run by HSBC Bank. It has now been taken over by JP Morgan, and all of the physical bullion in this account, the majority of it in its vaults in London and New York, are now moving to JP Morgan's vaults. And you want to talk about gold revaluation. JP Morgan now holds more gold than the reserves of the majority of the G20 nations. Now, it's not all theirs, but they are an agent for the government. We know that, because think of it this way. You just paid the largest fine 2 years ago for manipulating the silver market ever been paid by the Justice Department, but you can still run the world's largest silver trust. And we're only going to fine you $920 million, even though your metals desk made $1 billion that year. So you still walk away 80 million up, and we're going to let you do it, but we have to, we got to do this so that the public thinks all is okay. Well, why did they just take possession of GLD and hold all the gold and moving it into their own vaults? Could it be that they would revalue gold and confiscate the ETF gold, not confiscate the physical gold, but only the ETF gold? But why would I say that? Because the ETF gold is not deliverable unless you are one of the big commercial banks that funded it. It's called a basket, gazillion dollars worth. And so they could easily say, look, we're going to revalue gold. By the way, where is gold held in everyone's central bank balance sheet? The gold revaluation account. Can't make that shit up. The gold revaluation account is the name of it. The head of the Dutch National Bank has been screaming for years, we need to revalue the gold held on our balance sheet, revalue it to a level commensurate with today. It's still valued at $35 an ounce in Europe and $42.22 on the US balance sheet. And that brings me to the strategic Bitcoin account. And by the way, so they come in on a Friday night and they want to confiscate gold after the revaluation. And they say, well, what? We didn't take anyone's gold. We just took the ETF gold, which we just closed the fund and took it. You guys can't own it anyway. So no harm, no foul. That money that was in your account is in your money market. Go buy physical gold from Miles Franklin or whoever the hell you want. You can. So now they're sitting on the largest stockpile of silver in the world, the fourth largest stockpile of gold in the world, held by JP Morgan without infringing any civil liberties or breaking any laws. The prospectus says they can close those accounts, and you can't take possession of it anyway. So when we talk about the strategic Bitcoin account,
okay, hold on for a sec. Hold on to a sec. Don't go too fast. So going back to gold here, there's a comment by Cliff. We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to go back to your interview. So I've put the link in the description box below and also in the live chat. So if people want to go watch this Dr. Judy Shelton interview with yours, fascinating, by the way. Your gut feeling, pre-interview, post-interview, during the interview, are you cautiously optimistic about this person bringing in some type of sanity back into our monetary policy? Do you think that they're window dressing to some extent, or do you think they're very serious about what's coming up here?
She's spot on, serious, and said everything she could. She's an Austrian economist.
Yeah.
And I asked her about gold revaluation, and she didn't say yes, but she intimated yes, that's and she did tell me that she believes Trump will issue those bonds on July 4th, 2026, the 250th anniversary of the country, that he will issue them, that they talked about it in their first administration. And in order to do that, she said the first thing that we need to do is audit the gold. And the second thing we talked about was, would it be revalued? We talked about all of these things, the gold revaluation account and all of these things. Now, to Cliff's point, every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would give the Treasury General account $1 trillion free and clear in their account. So if you do the math, it works out to about $135,000. If you put gold at $135,000, it would make our balance sheet, the $36.5 trillion, level with the asset base that we have very quickly. And people say, well, that's asinine. That could never happen. But it was 16, 17, whatever it was, when Bitcoin was $400 a coin, and here we are.
People were saying that Cliff I was crazy when he said,
"Well, yeah,
Bitcoin, and here
we
are."
That. Was he crazy? No, he was early. Yes. Yeah. But that's the thing with most of us. We're early. I'd rather be 4 years early than 40 seconds late.
For sure.
So if you realize that look, why would the Bank of International Settlements, which is the most powerful bank on the planet, why would they reclassify gold tier 1? Why would the central banks be buying gold at a level the world has never seen? Over the last 2 months of the year, the central banks doubled their 12-month moving average leading up to it. That's after Trump had already, won the election, and they're doubling down their amounts. And leading up to it, they were hiding what they were buying, trying to lie about it. China's buying doré and concentrate all around South America directly from the miners. Exactly. So it isn't cataloged. It doesn't affect the price. The West has no idea. They're trying to be opaque about it. And why would they be open about it if it is going to back a new system where the most powerful bank in the world says, yes, it's the only other tier 1 asset next to Treasuries? So they keep buying it. They're doing it in a very opaque manner. They're mining it. They're the largest producers in the world. Part of me thinks the reason they came out with that mine, which is still much unconfirmed, is for them to have an alibi to say, okay, we actually have 40,000 metric tons. Like Alistair McLeod would say, we don't have the 2,600 that we've been telling you because we got it all from this mine. They've been mining 300 to 500 metric tons a year for 25 years. That's way more than we have in and of itself. And I just read an article the other day that women in India in jewelry alone are supposed to have north of 20 or 30 or 40,000 metric tons, massive amounts. There's more out there than we are being told. And if they are going to peg it to a new system, why would they be open about it? They wouldn't, because they'd get crowded out of their trade and the price would go up. So they play the Western game of suppression and stand for delivery. 45 million ounces of silver delivered off of COMEX in December. Who's got that bread? Where's it going?
Crazy. That's crazy.
And so when we talk about Bitcoin,
okay, hold on. So
yes.
You're absolutely right. That's crazy. And the mainstream news is still telling us gold is a pit rock. Don't touch that stuff. Leave your money in the bank. That's safe, right? At the same time, these big players are actually accumulating gold in a big way. Now, you've documented that quite a few times here on the channel. Now, let's look at this Bitcoin strategic reserve. So on one hand, we have Trump announcing this just before the campaign. He started talking about this Bitcoin strategic reserve. Then he talked about some type of coalition with gold at some point here. And he just recently, yesterday, I think, announced this $20 billion pledge here to create these data centers in North America. Again, presumably to make America the stepping stone for cryptocurrency, an innovation hub. He's talked about that. Our leader of the opposition here in Canada also is talking about the same words. So there's a lot of tectonic plates moving here in the world of finance, and it appears that the digital aspect of it cannot be overlooked here. Andy, what are your thoughts on this reserve? What does it mean moving forward for monetary policy?
Well, first of all, let's remember who's been dumping treasuries. Well, that's the rest of the world who's been financing our lifestyle for a long time. And that's a problem. Of course, we've seen a little bit of that vacuum filled by the money markets, record 7 trillion plus in money markets, all backed by treasuries, and the American public chasing yield, leaving their bank accounts, buying instruments that are backed by U.S. treasuries, the insurance companies backed by U.S. treasuries. How about the crypto market? All of a sudden, you see all these stable coins that are 85 to 95% backed by U.S. treasuries. It's no wonder, as the rest of the world is shedding treasuries to buy gold and to buy commodities, that the United States has been very open all of a sudden. From a guy that hated crypto, all of a sudden loves it. Yep. Maybe it has something to do with supporting the legacy system. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not sure. But when we talk about the strategic Bitcoin reserve account, it was brought up at the meeting in Tennessee, and Cynthia Loomis did speak right after Trump and said we should revalue gold, the gold that's held in the revaluation account, and use some of the proceeds to buy Bitcoin on behalf of the United States. So you keep hearing gold revaluation. And I think one of the mistakes that our communities make is infighting, thinking it has to be mutually exclusive of one another, and being confrontational and combative instead of being unified against the lunacy of the fiat system, of the Keynesian fiat system, and the lack of transparency. I think there will be a marriage between blockchain technology and precious metals. I don't think it's a bad idea to have a Bitcoin strategic account. I don't. There are a lot of things that you could do with that. But I also think gold is part of the plan. If you look at what the central banks are buying, it's not Bitcoin, it's gold. And part of me feels that that's something that we should think about. The public is running headfirst into crypto, where the central banks are moving the other direction. Now, I'm not making a statement against Bitcoin. I own some, but I just think that that's something to pay attention to. And maybe the plan is to have both as a reserve at much higher prices. And that would benefit not only the United States, but most of the world's central banks. And then go back to, why would the BIS reclassify gold as the only other tier 1 reserve asset? Why? And why are the central banks buying it the way that they are, doubling down their efforts? And look at the unit currency with the Brics. It's 40% gold backed. It hasn't come out yet, but that, according to the former president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, she's the head of the New Development Bank, has been agreed upon in principle. Right. So gold is going to have a role in this world. Now, I did an interview, and I'll probably get a lot of shit for this, but I did an interview, Francis Hunt, and I think people should check it out. Very interesting dude. And he more or less told me Trump was selected, not elected. He was selected to usher in the digital surveillance state, to make everyone feel very comfortable about cryptocurrencies, bringing in his cabinet like Elon, and focusing on the digital side of things. Now, even you just said it, he's known as the digital or the crypto president, and building servers and the strategic account. But he wants to roll in a digital system and move closer and closer. Now, the one thing I've
He
said
sa
on your
he
show,
says also as a cover for that, for election integrity, where if you look at Catherine Austin Fitts, she says, "We don't actually need that for election integrity. There's already laws on the books and ways that we can do that." So it's questionable still why he's pushing this digital era.
well,
What
if
do
you
you
look at who's got the patents on the ID 2020, it's scary as shit.
Mhm.
And it's Bill Gates, it's the Rockefeller Foundation, and it's this big, always forget the name, this big organization that focuses on the jab, on immunizations and vaccines. And the idea, if you look at all of their patents, is to tie in your bank records, your health records, your passport, everything on this one digital ID. Which, with cameras everywhere, and biometrics and facial recognition, governments, once you lose that, what did Ben Franklin say? Something to the extent of, once you give up privacy for safety, you never get it back. And that's kind of what's happening, in my opinion. And I think people should check out the Francis Hunt interview. It's very interesting. And he basically said that, not all is as it appears to be, but that we are in the middle of a transformation into a digital society.
And that's why we have to stay vigilant in all of this and continuing to have idle conversations about where the evidence leads, as opposed to the fear mongering. And I appreciate that, Andy. There's a lot still to decode here. Now, Cliff is asking a question in the chat, and I want you to come back and chime in on that.
Gabby, that's right. Gabby is the name of that other group. Thank you for that.
You and I have talked about many times this Jim Sinclair prediction that there would be 3 resets. That to some extent has also come through the WebBot data. And now Cliff is asking, I agree with Andy, in my opinion, the Trumpitos here have 3 phases for the dollar. First is to stabilize it, right? So we might be seeing that now with this backing, with a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and to some extent a connection to gold. But what are those next phases? As we stand now, and in the interviews you're having now with some of these insiders and perhaps those who are going to be part of the Trump administration, what do you see as these 3 phases of recess right now? If you go back to some of those predictions that Jim Sinclair was making, what does that look like today as we're analyzing this on January 8, 2025, Andy? Those 3 resets, what do you see?
Well, I think what Jim was talking about is very different than what is happening today. I mean, I don't think many people had this. Maybe Cliff did, because he sees way further out than the rest of us do. But I don't think Jim saw this dystopian reality that we have. I mean, look, what better person to bring in than the guy that is the master of the reorganization and the bankruptcy? I mean, I don't know if that's what Cliff is thinking. I haven't asked him. I haven't talked to Cliff for a while, but I would simply say that there has to be some sort, I would think, some sort of a reorganization or some sort of a reset. And I don't know how that looks. I don't. But in order to get to the other side, I think you have to deal with all of the debt. You have to have some sort of a reset. You have to have some sort of a new system. I don't know. I guess I'd like to ask Cliff that. Maybe he can chime in. I don't know what the other 2 sides look like, but I will say that I do believe gold will go higher than anyone thinks possible and will be pegged to a new system. And what better guy to preside over this whole restructuring than Trump? And look, if I had to guess, we will see a massive problem with the banks, which could very quickly bring down the entire ecosystem very quickly. And then you come in and you issue your new system, whether it's a new digital dollar pegged to something. But I find it interesting that, and I'd like to listen to that in a moment, but I do find it interesting that if you realize we have roughly $200 trillion in debt, who's it all owed to? Roughly only $7 trillion is owed to foreigners. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions, the $170 trillion in unfunded liabilities are owed to us. Who's been buying all the treasuries? Us. $7+ trillion in money markets. Like I said, all of the banks, all of the yield chasing. So you reset the system and issue a new commodity-backed digital currency because the whole system blew up. However it blows up, whether it be through the banks or the rest of the world saying these tariffs they're not tariffs, they're more sanctions masquerading as tariffs. Tariffs protect your manufacturing. You're not protecting anything. You're threatening us, and if we don't, then you're going to do that's a sanction. And maybe they say, screw it, we're done, we're moving on our own, and we dump dollars in treasuries across the globe in unison. The Operation Sandman, as we've talked about before, resets the system. maybe it's something not as crazy as that. All I can simply say is if I had to guess, fine, stabilize the dollar first and then blow up the ecosystem and come in and issue a new system altogether. But the majority of the debt restructuring is owed to the American people. Very little of it, 3.5 cents on the dollar, if it's 200 trillion, is owed to the rest of the world. It would be something that is doable. It would be like the Shawshank Redemption. You got to crawl through 2 miles of shit to get to the other side, but there is hope at the other side. And I think no one would be better to explain what that path looks like maybe than Cliff. But I do see it as something that ultimately has to be dealt with one way or the other.
So a couple of things there. Let me backtrack. So for the audience who haven't seen this particular video, Trump fucks up. He was talking about these 3 resets of sorts. The first one was attempting to fix the old system. And I think to some extent, Andy, you're right when you're saying the terrorists won't work in fixing the old system. We have to go much deeper than that. Cliff was then suggesting that in the data, we would have this rebirth of sorts here, presumably having something to do with the Bitcoin strategic reserve or a backing of gold or some type of stability there that, again, would be rejected. And then something completely new from that in a third phase. And eventually that zero there at the bottom of the screen goes to 0 point energy, to where technology is released. And now we can really address the root causes of the problems and really reconstitute our financial world. So that could be in the next 3 months. I believe it was the timelines here. That's what's on this on the screen now to Trump taking office. So a lot is going to happen here very, very soon. And it behooves the audience members to kind of stay agile and be very vigilant here as to all of these solutions that are offered, and for people to think about their own protection in all of this, and not necessarily to follow what the mainstream news is telling you is the correct way to go, but to do your own research here and follow moving forward.
Well, you
beware moving forward.
You talk about zero energy. People say, "Oh, that's such bullshit," but it's not. I mean, study the Great Pyramid of Giza for a few minutes and really study it, and Nikola Tesla, and you will understand that what he is saying is not extraordinarily crazy. In fact, it's very, very, very compelling. And I watched this show called The Y Files on YouTube, and the one episode that talks about Tesla and the Great Pyramid of Giza will blow your damn mind on many, many levels, like blow your mind. And everything the guy says is rooted in science and in fact. And then you take away from it what you want. But what he says is not out of line. In fact,
no, and you have to look. Even officialdom now is in a limited hangout, mind you, telling you that this exists. Just look at the Pentagon's release of the videos of the Tic Tac UFOs and all that. There's a lot there still to discover. I'm totally with you on this. This is not a tinfoil hat. Now, also, what's not tinfoil hat is the problem at the banking level. You just mentioned that. Cliff, in the message to me a couple of days ago, was saying that this was probably going to rise sometime in February here. After Trump takes office, we're going to see some very difficult situations here in the banking system. Now, Rafi Farber was just posting this 2 days ago. Bank reserve just fell below $3 trillion. This is the same level of bank reserves we were at just prior to the regional banking crisis of March of 2023. You and I were doing a series at that time on the banking situation and how bad it was. It appears we're right back here right now. Go back in time here to March 2023, what happened, where we are today, and why it's very critical for the people watching the show here to keep this information on their radar as they plot their course. Andy.
Yeah, well, we are right back. It's a liquidity crisis that you're seeing, and that's everyone chasing yield, pulling all of their money out of the banks, which are dying for reserves. And at the same time, you see the repo market drained to nearly zero. And if you take a look at the BTFP, the Bank Term Funding Program that was brought in March and April after Silicon Valley and Signature Bank failed and were illegally bailed out. Remember, the Dodd-Frank Act says you can't do that anymore. You are an unsecured general creditor of the bank. And the stopgap measure was the BTFP, this funding program that threw a lifeline to the banks that ended in March. They won't issue any other this last March. They wouldn't issue any new loans, but the ones that were written up until that point will completely expire next March. But what you basically have is you don't have that life raft anymore, and not enough people even know of Bank bail-ins know that it's law, and nobody hardly, other than the people listening to me scream about it, even noticed poor little old Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma, that was bailed in, and no one talked about it. It wasn't anywhere. It's on the FDIC website, of course, and it's also on a little Fox regional news channel if you Google it. But they were bailed in,
and on a very small interview between JC and Andy Shackman when it happened. But that's about it. You're right.
Right. It's nowhere. But that was a trial balloon, if you will. And if you were to see, look, it's as simple as letting one of these big regional banks blow up. Boom. Just like that, and bailed in, and it would freak out the public so badly that it would create a bank run, which would suck the whole system down, just like that. And that's how fragile it is. And when I think about a rug pull, if there ever were such a thing, look at how condensed all the money is. You got all the money in equities and 7 stocks. You got a record amount of money, between 7 and 8 trillion in money markets, and you have the rest of it in crypto. So, you got these three groups that you pull down one big bank and create a bank run with the systemic nature of everything. There's your reset right there. Yeah. And it's that's reality. And the people don't realize that, that money is not safe in the banks, because the banks that failed, other than Lindsay, were all like either illegally bailed out or gobbled up by other larger banks like JP Morgan. I don't know. I also, I find it very, very compelling and interesting that JP Morgan has become the custodian of GLD. I mean, what better way? You got all the gold. They're already the custodian of SLV. What better way? If you're going to do this, you're going to reset the system. It's doable. I think they could do it.
To have it all under one house and one control. Yes. It seems to be the strategy being at play here. Now, let me ask you. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago the amalgamation, or the joining of crypto technology, blockchain, open ledger technology with gold and silver. Now, you and I have talked about briefly in the last year about Sprott and how they were using open ledger also with gold. Let me see if I can bring that up for the audience members. But where do you see right now this technology moving forward in the ability for people to store gold maybe in a safe manner through some of these services, but then be able to draw on their gold or silver in this particular case using crypto technology? Where are we on that? What's the beginning? What's Sprott trying to do here compared to some of these other memes and meme coins that we're seeing out there that are very, very volatile at this point? Well, where do you see this technology going, Andy?
I'll tell you something really interesting in a moment, but my company actually helped design this program. Rick Rule is a good friend of mine, asked me to get involved in it. I put all of my resources into it, and we did the Genesis trade on the blockchain, which is the first trade for all of the Sprott C-suite players, and also Tradewinds, the group that helped actually did the technology. They went bankrupt. But I'm very familiar with the Vault Chain product, and it's just gold held really in working form, which was one of the things that kind of bothered me, meaning it could be a spool of gold bullion. And in the Royal Canadian Mint, if you haven't gone, JC, it's a tour worth taking. They have giant spools. Like if it fell on you, it would crush you in 1/8 of a second. It's massive spool of gold, and it's about paper thin, and they feed it into the machines to make their coins. And it could be that, or it could be coins, or it could be anything, scrap. And it's denoted on a distributed ledger, on a blockchain, a private permission-based blockchain. It didn't work because it wasn't a crypto. It's no different than me holding gold for someone in one of our Brics facilities. The only difference is they get a statement instead of being able to see it on a permission-based blockchain. It wasn't really what it was supposed to be. But one of the very interesting things that Judy Shelton said to me was, I could see stable coins being issued off of the 50-year gold-backed treasury. She said that in this interview. Right. So here you have a woman saying that, she in essence wants to bring back gold into the system and then marry the two by issuing stable coins backed against that treasury. And, before that, she says need to audit the gold, and then more or less, I don't know what she can and can't say, but more or less said gold should be revalued. To what level? Not sure. So
Right.
I do believe that there will be a marriage. I mean, if you look at the way the BRICS have it, it's MBridge, it's the unit token, it's 40% gold backing deliverable to those countries or central banks that want to receive or have the gold delivered. That's exactly what I'm talking about, a marriage between a tangible asset. And the reason that where blockchain comes into play is to give it veracity, to give it transparency, because no one believes anything anymore, and everyone feels everyone is being lied to, and rightfully so, on just about every level. So you
So
want
this
to
is where
inspire
I'm
confidence.
going with this. We're going to see competition in this open market of people offering coins, perhaps that are going to be backed by gold with some of these services. And as you say, the reason I'm asking you is you are part of the genesis of this, and the idea is lofty, and I think it has a lot of value moving forward, because a lot of people who are holding gold now, as we saw in Australia and other jurisdictions around the world, only come to realize after they come to draw their gold that their gold isn't there, or that it's not allocated or segregated as apparently their contracts was stated. So having this on a blockchain could be a stepping stone here to bringing back credibility to that system. Now, when you saw Texas just a couple of months ago introduce also the idea of putting forward this cryptocurrency backed by gold, are you seeing that, and are you seeing a movement and maybe other players on the field right now as you're doing these interviews where people are trying to bring exactly that, some type of currency? Like she talked about a stable coin. That's not the USDC. That's not the US dollar. She's talking about a stable coin, which I thought was very interesting in that interview. But are you seeing the emergence perhaps of a conversation that could bring that into a national currency to where it's actually redeemable by gold and silver? Now, you and I have talked about many times how governments probably don't want that. That's going to really tie their hands behind their back in terms of deficit spending. But could there be competition either at the state level or at the private level to bring this technology moving forward? Where are we in that timeline, Andy?
Well, de Gaulle from France proved convertible currencies convert. They don't want it, but that is what the interesting thing is about the Texas legislation, the proposal, is to make it just that, redeemable. Yeah. And I think in order to give it veracity, certainly on the public level, yeah, you make it redeemable. And over time, as people begin to trust the system, well, they'll just pour more gold into the system. That's the whole reason that they did this versus this, right? So this is a $20 gold coin, right? That's from 1908. And this was a $20 gold certificate. They were redeemable, but there was trust within the system. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave my gold with you and take the paper certificate, knowing I can go get it because I trust you. Well, over time, if trust were expanded and all of a sudden people are like, yeah, man, it's been great. You can get your gold if you need it. It's totally sweet. It's easy. You can buy anywhere. Then the gold would move towards the vaults and towards the system. But the minute there's any sniff of impropriety or fraud, well, pull the gold out. So it's a long road to hoe, but it's something that I think inspires great optimism. It's the American spirit is what it is. It's pushing back against the idiocy of our fiscal irresponsibility and the lunacy of our brain dead monetary policy. And God bless these countries or these states that are standing up to it, like Texas, like Utah, like Oklahoma, and others that are saying enough is enough already. We need to give our constituents a fighting chance. And so
which leads us back to the introduction.
It would be key.
Which leads us back to the introduction of this show. Trump is fighting on many fronts. He's fighting the BRICS nations outside of the country, but he's also fighting these challenges from within to the dollar. And so it's going to be very fascinating moving forward. Now, Andy, the problem with all of that, and you and I have discussed this for many years, is the lack of financial media reporting, or at least honest financial media reporting about what's happening and the connecting the dots. Not only are they not reporting the truth and telling us the real situation of our economic matters, but they're also, for the best part, and I'm being diplomatic here, lulling people back into a sense of biased complacency. And I think that's very dangerous given where we're at now. It appears that all vectors are pointing together, whether those are the extraterrestrial threats that we're seeing in New Jersey, the drone situation, this zero-point technology that could be a very big disruptive force, and whatever other countries or the BRICS amalgamations and how they might be threatening our shores. There's a lot at play here right now, and it's all converging to this time point. And for the people who are not prepared right now and are still listening to mainstream news, um, they're not being served well by their mainstream news. What do you say to them in terms of, one, not falling ill to this complacency, but also maybe calling out their friends and their families to say, hey, guys, we're at a critical time point here, and we really need to pay attention and work together. What do you say? What were your conversations like during Christmas and New Year's Eve, where you and I in the last couple of years weren't invited because of these conversations?
Well, my wife for the last 2 years, 3 years in a row would grab me by the back of my neck and say, if you say a damn word when we walk into Thanksgiving dinner, I'm going to kill you. And because I've had that before. And that's one of the things that bothered me the most over the last 4 years is wasn't even the pandemic that freaked me out. It was the fact that going on shows like yours, you couldn't say certain words, risking of being deplatformed. Our mutual friend, Sarah Westall, GoDaddy took her entire IP down, the whole website gone.
Yeah.
The divisiveness that has been fostered by these groups is outlandish. It's criminal and treasonous. The media is supposed to be unbiased. They've been anything but. Everything we've seen over the last 4 years, largely coming out of the media, has been a lie. And whether or not they knew it, were party to it, or just didn't give a damn, and the whole concept of journalistic integrity went out the window. I used to when I was in college and newly married, I used to love David Letterman. I would watch him at night. I thought he was great. One day I was in New York City, and this guy comes up to my wife and I. We just got out of a bar, had a couple drinks, and I'm standing on the corner, and this guy says, "Hey, where was Paul Schaefer born?" And I'm like, "What?" My wife says, "Toronto." "You're right. You win tickets to David Letterman. He likes a full audience." I mean, it was cool. I went and saw him.
Yeah.
But when Trump was elected in 2016, the late night media lost their stupid mind, and I stopped. I've never watched any of them ever since.
Yeah.
In all of that time, and the mainstream media is the same thing. They've lost all credibility. I think what they have done is treasonous. They've destroyed families. They've destroyed the fabric of this country by not only misreporting, but inflammatory reporting that was 100% false and painting a false narrative. And then when people like you and I and Cliff and everyone else works our ass off to find the truth, there are a lot of people like your people who will appreciate that, but it's our own family that it isn't. So, look, I think one thing Trump could do right away that would, in my opinion, would garner a lot of credibility, a lot of support, and a lot of I don't know. I just think it's what goes around comes around, is to really give it to the mainstream media, to impose guidelines, to say, if you are not doing your journalistic integrity, you face fines. The things that they did created and exacerbated problems. I left Minneapolis because of what happened, and they were trying to say it was peaceful protests as the city I love was literally burned to the ground.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know. I find the mainstream legacy media to be appalling, and I don't have anything to do with them anymore. I once in a while watch Fox News. That's as far as I go, and that's just out of convenience first thing in the morning. But I think anyone who's getting their news from the mainstream is well past misinformed. They're being misdirected, which is a bad thing.
Deliberately so.
Yes.
In very cases. I agree with you too. The Trump administration, maybe one of the first things they can do is defund this ministry of censorship that was ongoing here, having all the back doors to all the social media to deplatform people. I noticed this morning or yesterday morning also that Zuckerberg is reversing course on the community notes and the fact checkers supposedly on Facebook. So
I wonder if Trump twisted him by the short hairs and said, "You're going to change, young man. You're going to change." And he went and visited him, Mar-a-Lago. So did.
Don't forget Trump before the election and during the election, he said you will be prosecuted for any election interference.
As he should. This is not communist North Korea. This is the country where our people rely upon an unbiased media, to help us discern what the hell is going on, and yet
need fair elections. Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm with you. Hey, Andy, before we go, we're already at the hour mark here. During Christmas, you had this special going on for the junk silver.
So I just talked to Brics Weird today.
Yeah.
I just talked with Brics, and he asked me, and I told him I'm dropping that down for his channel, and we'll do it for yours also to $1.69 over.
Wow.
So I'm also next week having those maples are a great deal. All that stuff's great. But I have next week, I will have maybe the best gold special I've ever had. And I can't get into it yet, but suffice it to say, I'm not joking. It will be the best I've ever had. And I think people will really love what I'm going to offer them. I'm buying an extraordinarily large amount of pre-1933 U.S. gold, and an extraordinarily large amount, more than I'm really very comfortable buying. But it will be at the best value I've ever sold them for, probably in my career. So keep that in mind. But as far as pre-65 silver, we call it junk silver. It shouldn't be called junk, but it is. I would tell you unequivocally, it's the best value, period, in the silver space, period. On many metrics, the divisibility, the utility, the fact that it was issued by the Treasury, and the fact that during the pandemic, it had higher premiums than any silver item in North America other than Silver Eagles. And now it has the lowest. And as pendulums swing this way, they often swing that way, and it hasn't found its equilibrium with reality yet. To me, at $1.69 over for pre-65 silver. Now, my whole staff doesn't know this yet. I tried to alert them to it.
Well, your email queue is about to blow up because
I was talking to Fix. I'm like, that's what. And this was right before I got on your show. So $1.69 over for your listeners, for Brics listeners, and it's the best value in silver, hands down.
Guys, check it out, beyondmystic.net/silver. Fill out the form here and have Andy's guys get this out to you as soon as possible. And check us again, of course, next week for the next edition of the Beyond the Vault with Andy Schekman. Tonight, guys, I'm going to be back on the news here. If you haven't seen this, also, please go check it out. The federal court challenge here to Trudeau's prorogation. I did a special report earlier today. I might have Viva Frey also on the line here. We're trying to schedule an interview to look at this prorogation challenge moving forward.
What does prorogation mean? Sorry to seem stupid. What does that mean?
Prorogation is a term in Westminster rules of democracy where we basically suspend government. So it's a tactic that's been used many times over the years for different circumstances, but it was never meant for avoiding political consequences and the governance of the House. Whereas this time around, and apparently just like it was for Boris Johnson in 2019, where he was also trying to prorogue the House to deal with the Brexit situation and not have to deal with the onslaught and the difficult questions in the House. So there's a challenge right now as to what Trudeau just did on January 6th, proroguing the House here and suggesting that he might at some point resign here after a leadership race. So right now there is a government challenge, a challenge to the government's decision here being brought forward. It was filed yesterday in court, and so that'll be very interesting to see if we here in Canada uphold the legislation and the jurisprudence and the common law that was set as precedents in 2019 in the UK. So fascinating times, a lot of moving parts here in Canadian politics. So follow me for that. And of course, guys, I'm going to be back tonight at 8:00 Eastern for the next edition of the Beyond the News. I love you guys. Thank you so much, Andy, for being on.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to go. Yeah. So someone fierce and limitless says there's no junk silver on the Miles Franklin bullion site. It's there, but remember, after they go to your page to request information, we will send them a price list that we don't publish for about 25 reasons. I don't publish it. There is a reason I don't, but our prices will be as good or better than anyone in the country, including on that. And anything else that you want, you can go to the site for general information if you're buying tiny amounts, but you'll always be best served to contact us directly or through JC's link, which is preferred, and we'll make sure you're getting the best price, and you'll get our price list, which is not public knowledge, but is going to be better than anything you see. So sorry to interrupt. I know you're in a hurry. I'll let you run. Always great to see you. Can't wait to pick up where we left off, and Happy New Year, brother. Happy New Year to you all.
Thanks. Same to you, Andy, and we'll see you again next week. And Andy, are you okay to just switch this to Wednesdays at 2 p.m. instead of the Thursday time slot?
I think so. Let me double check real quick.
I know in the summer you were playing baseball and you had some golf commitments.
Well, yeah,
I'd like to move it to Wednesday for 2025 if it's possible. At least for
that should be just fine. I will say that Next week, I can do it next week at 1:00, not at 2. But then the following week, I'm at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. So let's just say by January 29th.
Let's play by ear then for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll figure this out for
January 29th and forward. Wednesdays it is.
All right, sounds good.
All the best to you all.
Have a great day,
See you, bro.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.